other thing, so we started releasing Under the Scales episodes again, and I think people are stoked to be able to listen to Under the Scales again, which is great. We are asking people to consider donating, giving your money to us, Osiris Premium. It's $5 a month, and it helps us keep going. You can go to osirispod.com/premium to check that out. But we would love to have your support so that we can keep going. We're all volunteers. Um, you know, that's how we live our lives, for
Help
better
some
and
of
worse.
us pay for internet upgrades, whatever it may be.
Yeah.
We're over here like rubbing two sticks together, just hoping we get a connection. Hi guys.
Hey,
Hey,
Brian.
Brian.
I know, Brian. We were waiting for you. I know. I need. Look, my espresso doesn't even have like a proper crema on top. It's like I'm using a kind of budget espresso machine here at our beach
We need
house.
to upgrade modems, espresso machines. Like we have
got.
things we need to do. Like
We
look it
need.
up.
I haven't
We
bought a
need.
new Cubs hat in at least 12 months. Like, what is going on here, guys? We are just rubbing pennies together.
Ryan and Neil tuning in from the car. What's up, guys?
Oh my God. I had the best weekend with them in Northlands. We had so much fun together. And I didn't get to listen to almost always there yesterday, but if I didn't get a shout out, I'm going to be pissed because we had a lot of fun together.
I'm sure you did.
I
do want to.
got a video from Neil last night that was very, very summer 2003. I'll just let the mystery of that linger out there.
Ooh.
I'm gonna be hosting Ryan and Neil at my house in about a week and a half for the Goose show at the Man, and then we're gonna truck it up to Forest Hills together. So I'm gonna be hanging out with these guys in a couple weeks. Can't wait.
Well, I had a funny conversation with Neil about that, RJ, because Neil was like, Ryan said that he could stay over at your house. And Neil was like, I don't know if that's true or not. Cause Ryan likes to like stick his foot in doors that aren't always open. And I was like, I can confirm RJ has said to me that he would like you to stay at his house, Neil. So, Neil is one of the best people to do shows with, like hands down. So I confirmed that you were welcome. He was welcome, excuse me, at the B household. Yeah.
Well, all I know is that kids these days are so hard to communicate with. I sent Neil this screenshot of this text with Ryan. I think I said to Ryan, "Are you guys staying at my house or not?" And he said, "No, we're going up to New York." And I said, and then Neil was like, "Wait, no, we are staying with you." And I'm like, "Can you just tell me?" Like everyone's invited. Anyway, it's gonna be a fun day. We're gonna get to see Goose at the Man, and then we're gonna go up to Forest Hills, and I can't wait to see Goose because it seems like they're pretty good right now.
Oh my God, the Goose show I saw the other night. I'm not going to go deep, but it was phenomenal. It was so great.
So today we are talking about summer 2003, and today's Brian's Day. It's Father's Day. It's one of Brian's favorite tours of all time. And honestly, isn't every episode Brian's Day? I feel like every episode is for Brian. And Brian,
well, he's always ready more than anybody else to talk about everything.
He is. He might be frozen in a state of just pure bliss. But we were talking about summer 2003, and I will run this quickly, Meg. It was ranked number 27 by fans.
Ouch.
And ranked number 14 by us. So we're gonna have to talk about why that is. This is the last tour of the top 25 that doesn't have full alignment between us and the fans. I think from here forward, they're pretty well aligned in terms of the rankings. They're like both top 14ish, and there's a few surprises at the top, but everything that you think is going to have, like, if you're worried that one of your top 15 tours is not going to be covered, it almost certainly is. So we're heading into I guess we're basically halfway done with the project, which is kind of crazy.
That is crazy. Yeah, it feels exciting. I got to talk to a few people at Northlands about this series, and everybody's been really into it and excited about it. And it's been fun to hear feedback about what it's been like kind of following this project along.
Yeah, and I will say, just thinking about the tour next week, it's a lot of work. We, like, the way this podcast started is we would talk about a show, sometimes with a guest. And like listening to one show per week is great. Listening to 30 shows in 1 week, not great.
It's definitely like a crash course. I feel like every week I am studying for a final and I have to pull multiple like all-nighters to do it. It's been a lift for sure, but I feel like I'm getting a real education in a way that I just couldn't get another way. So I'm going to know everything about fish after this series. Basically.
Yeah. It's a great series. It's a lot. And I will say here, we have we have some 2.0 people coming into the mix here. We got Matt Dwyer saying both rankings are too low.
Yes.
Matt, you're welcome anytime. I do think what Brian says here from attendance bias, the disconnect because 2003 gets lumped in with 2.0, which has a bad rep as a whole. Lots of gems. Yeah, I agree. That was a takeaway of mine, which we'll get into. But I guess Meg, do you want to do a quick overview of the tour, and then we'll kind of get back into it once Brian's here.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all know, but they start the year with the 3 Hampton shows, and then they have a really strong winter tour in February. This summer tour was 21 shows. So it starts out west, goes to the Midwest, goes to the Southeast, ends in the Northeast. There's the show at Star Lake that we talked about on 40 for 40. And then they end the summer at the IT Festival, which is the band's 6th festival. And of course, they have one of the highlights of the year in the Tower Jam. Throughout this year, they're also going to be recording Undermine. And I think it's important to note that we also know that Trey was really making an effort on this tour, as all of them were to stay sober. They were working out, doing yoga, and apparently inspired by Neil Young to leave right after the show, which I think Trey still does today. You would probably know that more than I do, but it seems like he gets out right after. They also started releasing all the shows on Live Fish from the reunion in 2002 until today. And this downloading, being able to download these shows right away, I think was really innovative and really helped change the licensing for covers as well. And it just the impact that's had on all these bands. You think about a band like Goose, I don't know if they'd be where they are if we couldn't listen to their shows
Yeah.
every day like we can. It's just made such an impact on so many bands. But this
Really crazy.
tour also, has a lot of new songs. We've got lots of songs this year from Round Room, Seven Below, Walls of the Cave, Sense. This is the year of Piper. A lot's going on this year.
Yeah, thank you for running that down. I guess, but I just want to say one more thing. Sorry, as we're getting going here. Hold on. Sorry, I'm trying to help. I'm helping. I want to help Brian get back.
Yes.
Get back in the mix here. So yeah, I mean, I think that I don't want to go too far ahead in terms of takeaways, but it seems to me like Mike is sounding really good throughout the tour, and then I don't know. I think that it seems like the music kind of builds toward it, in a way that it seems to me like it keeps getting better. And I do think maybe that's part of the lack of sobriety or less so. I feel like as it went on, maybe it
that's
got a little
interesting.
I think it got a little more loose, as it went on, but there was certainly an effort, like you said.
Well, I kind of wondered if it was the opposite, if it was like that it sounded clunky and like the fish machine just sounded like it wasn't like didn't have that dexterity and phrasing that they usually do at the beginning of the tour, but by the end they totally do. And I was wondering if it was actually the benefit of being sober that whole time and just playing so much more together and kind of getting that machine going again. Curious.
I think maybe it went slightly downhill toward the end, but
Mhm.
to the benefit of the jams.
For sure.
Like I think the party built toward it. That's the impression that I got. But I do think for a lot of the tour, it was very focused, with a few exceptions. Brian, we haven't gotten too far here, but I guess the first thing I want to say is actually, can I play a voicemail from about last week's episode? Because I want to give a little bit of we got to give props to our listeners who are extremely excited about this series.
Hi, this is Ben in DC, and I'm just calling to say thanks for the love for 11/29/98. This is a show that has always had a special place in my heart because this was my very first Fish show, and it was also my 19th birthday. So even at the time, everybody's always talking about 11/27/98, as you said, and even at the time, I kind of had this sense that I had missed this show by 2 days, but 11/29 was a great show too. And I'll also note that when Seth Iacovone joined the band at the end of the first set, when they covered Layla, that was not only the debut, but that is the only time to this day that Fish has ever covered Layla. And I think the reason is that to do it right, you need 2 lead guitars, which they don't usually have. So thanks again, and keep up the good work.
So there you go. See, we're getting a little love for our Fall '98 dive. Trey, of course, played the whole album with Tedeschi Trucks 2019, which I was just listening to the vinyl the other day. That's a lot of fun. But Brian, okay, so Brian, tell us why this is the last tour of the series where we're kind of off between us and the fans. We ranked it 14, the fans ranked it 27, and if you didn't see Matt's comment, both rankings are too low. So Brian, why is this tour ranked where it is?
Well, I would agree with Matt. I think that this is too low. If I were ranking my own personal top 10 tours or top tours in Phish history, I don't think that this goes lower for me than 9 or 10. I think that this is one of the strongest tours the band has ever embarked upon. I think it's one of the more fascinating personal tours. I think it's filled with creative risk taking that's really rewarded across the entire tour. I think that the simplest reason why it was out of the top 25 from the fans is that it's 2.0, and I think that there's a
100%.
very it's the same thing as like when we put 3.0 tours in this list, which is being honest and accurate about the fact that the band has had necessary peaks and valleys in their career, and I think intentionally so. They are constantly moving forward. They're constantly evolving. They're constantly challenging themselves. We got some pushback that there were 3.0 tours within this larger series, and there were even some 4.0 tours to come. So be mindful of that. But I think that, like when you get out of the 90s, there's a faction of the fan base that's just like, it can't be better than anything played in the 90s. And I think that when you listen back to the band in the 90s, there were ups and downs the same way that there are in any era. So I think that aside, to me, the greatness of this tour is found in the last 5 shows. If you don't listen to any other part of this tour, from the moment they step on stage on July 29th in Burgettstown and unleash a number of songs that had yet to be played in 2.0 or relative rarities, and then come out and play what I would personally consider the best song of the entire era, or the best jam of the entire era. They play a totally representative show the next night in Camden. A really excellent rock show that has great jamming on the 31st. And then the IT Festival that is, to my ears, perfect Phish. Like late night, deep, swampy, kind of maniacal, middle-aged, exhausted, trying to communicate who they are exactly at that point in time. You get that across those 6 sets, plus the sound check, plus the Tower Jam. It's just, what else do I need to say? I love the vibe of this tour. I think that I'll conclude with this because there's more to say here. But to me, the thing that attracts me the most to this band over the last 20 years for myself, listening across their whole 40-year history, is that at no point are they ever afraid to say, let's take this chance and see what happens. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And sometimes it works for some people and sometimes it doesn't work for other people, and vice versa as they evolve and grow through their career. But they're never afraid to take that risk and fully dive into a sound. And this is one of those periods where they just dive into a unified sound and a unified idea that just brilliantly showcases who they are as people at that point in
time. All right, we'll see you next week. Thanks, Brian.
Yeah, exactly.
Kind of summed it up there. So I'll say that I'm not afraid to admit that doing this project changed my perspective on this tour. And I've been listening to this tour for however long it's been since the tour. So it's not like I never listened to it. I've been listening to it on and off. It has one of my favorite jams in the middle of the tour. But I do think I think what the comment earlier from Brian, just that, 2.0 gets kind of lumped into a big category. And I think most people who listen to this era know that this tour does sound different. But I honestly haven't gone through every show like that probably since they were released in 2003, and I was like downloading them and to my laptop or whatever. So like
Yeah.
I think there's a lot to like. I also think like this is really the first time we heard new Phish material since '98. So and I think
Mhm.
like
Yeah.
as always, like the new material kind of fuels this improv. I think you can kind of absorb this tour by going through highlights. Like I don't think you need to listen to full
Yeah.
shows like you do with some tours, but
Not
um
till the end.
yeah. And Meg, I want to hear your like any takeaways you have. But my last thing is I don't think this tour is anything that they couldn't do now. Listening to it, like listening to the style and the way that they're playing, like I don't think this would be out of reach for them to play like this now. Whereas some of the tours that we talk about, like particularly the earlier '90s ones, obviously it's just different tempos, different playing from Trey, etc.
Mm,
Like this to me feels like not that different from the current era in terms of how they approach improv.
that's really interesting. Yeah, I think they're willing to sit in spaces like they are now. I think that
Yeah.
seems like something that really stood out to me. And I have told both of you, and I will fully admit this on air, that I'm pretty ignorant about 2.0. I until I met Brian, I didn't really have a good friend who like was from this era. And so I didn't have somebody like advocating for 2.0. And before I was on the pod, I listened to Current Fish and then I listened to Nostalgic Fish. And so that was all just 1.0 for me. And I have listened to, pockets of this, but I have never listened to a full tour like this. And it was pretty mind blowing. I think comparing it to last week when we did Fall 98, where, I said that they were good enough to fuck around and find out and kind of find moments of brilliance, even when they were partying like crazy. They're not there anymore. But this summer, they really tap into the magic of the unknown and they feel so connected and exploratory. And the beginning, like I mentioned earlier, it does sound clunky. It does sound like just like the machine's not there. You think of like that yem that they start with in Shoreline, like obviously very emotional and like, a throwback, but it doesn't have the tightness, but they have it by the end. Like you think of the yem at it. It's so unbelievable. You can see the journey that the band has taken, like just tightening up together, but also being so loose in their jamming in a way that is just really, really spectacular. I thought that the the willingness, like you were saying, Brian, to just like go off the deep end and just completely commit to that space is something that really just I loved listening to. And I think that this tour kind of reminds me of, when you're in college and like you're you're partying a ton and then you decide like, okay, it's finals week. I have to like get my shit together. Maybe your parents are coming to visit and you like spend a week like sober and you like realize that like things are so much easier when you're sober and like everything actually starts to work and you can write really good papers and you're like, okay, this is amazing. I feel like this tour is kind of like that in that sense that they recognize like what they can do. And I think it's really important for them at this point too, in the context of the band. If they had never had the 2 big tours that they have in 2003, would they have come back after? Would they have thought that they weren't gonna be able to tap into that after 1.0? I don't know because, there's an argument to say that, like, they break up then and they're like, "Well, we had 2 years that were kinda garbage, like, are we really gonna, like, try this again?" So I think that these tours are really important for the future of Fish.
It's also interesting because I hadn't thought about that last point that you made. Like, I don't know, and I don't know if we'll ever know what the band was thinking about their past when they came back.
Mm,
Like, I've always thought of the Fluffhead that they opened Hampton with as almost kind of a rebuke of the 2.0 era. That, like,
yeah.
hey, we all came back and it was up and down and it was hazy and it didn't end very well. And this is a totally new era. And so I almost felt like that helped to set this kind of perspective going forward.
Mhm.
That I know, like, unfortunately, a lot of really smart Fish fans, I don't want to call anyone out, but like, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of who like publicly says, I don't listen to 2.0. And like, I don't know what to say because like I think that there's like this sense that like when they came back in 3.0 is to make right of what went wrong. And I think your
Mm.
point, Meg, is interesting. I wonder if there were ever conversations of like we did really play well when we had things focused. It was different because this tour and this larger era I think if you remove most of what happened in 2004, this reminds me of, and I think even if you included it because it's part of the story, but like this reminds me of any great rock band who has longevity goes through this. Like Neil
Yeah.
and Dylan in the 80s, Springsteen, U2 in the 90s. Um, this is an era in the band's history that is, um, you know, they're not writing their quote unquote best music, and they're trying to find a new way to approach their old music while also pointing a direction forward. And it's kind of like just middle age in and of itself, that you don't really want to think like this when you're in your 20s, and by the time you get to your 50s and 60s you almost might look back on this era as like just a giant fog of being tired all the time and running around and just like going through the motions. And I think there's like a sense of that within this larger era that it feels to me in that sense like the most like a lot of Fish feels escapism. This feels like the most grounded and rooted Fish in like domesticity and life. And so I wonder if they had those
Mm.
conversations leading into
Hmm.
99. I don't know. I never thought about it like that. It's really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I know that
Mm.
like, yeah, so they, you know, they had like people on the road with them who were kind of like keeping them, helping them stay healthy. And then, yeah, it's interesting. I mean, it's hard to know what they were thinking. I mean, I think the only real, I guess the only real insight we have is from Trey, like on Alive Again, which Nick, who does all our social media, posted yesterday. Yesterday was the anniversary of that podcast, so we like reposted that, and it was such a fun project. But he talked about like coming back at Hampton 03, and that like that's one of the reasons that they had to like take a break, was like it was crazy. And he said that like set break of the first show of MSG, and it was all immediately exactly the way it was before.
Yeah.
So obviously they had to make changes like during this tour. I think that winter 2003 tour was probably similar.
Mm.
You can kind of hear it more, I think, than you can hear it here. So you can tell, you know.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So okay, should we talk about some jams?
I
Yeah.
think that's the thing that we talk about when we talk about summer.
And Matt
2003.
made a comment here. The flubs versus epic jams was a big thing, and yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, Brian, what's your take on that particular aspect?
I mean, I think it's loose. I definitely think it is. I think that the one thing that has benefited this tour in particular is time, because I mean, the goal when they came back in 09 was tightness, and there's a lot of flubby playing throughout 09, 10, and 11. To my ears, it really wasn't until 2012 that they reached this like perfect medium of tightness plus improvisation again. And that 2012 to 2015 period is some of the tightest Fish outside of the early 90s that I've ever heard. Um, I think to Matt's point as well, this is like an interesting evolution. Matt, I believe, is a 2.0 kid, the same as I am.
Yep.
And we've talked a little bit about this. I don't want to put words in his mouth, so Matt, in the comments, like negate anything that I say here. But my experience coming into 2.0 was I felt like I had researched like a term paper better than I'd ever researched anything in my entire life. And I sat down for the quiz or for the test and was just like, what the fuck is this? Like, what am I to do with this? This is so different from what I prepared for. Like, I was listening to happy, funny,
Yeah.
zany, weird, high energy Fish. And the first show I saw, the band stepped on stage and didn't say a single word to us and just dove into jams. And they were dark and they were hazy and they were weird. And like 19-year-old me was just not ready for this. And in addition to that, if you went online to talk about Fish, everyone who had seen Fish in the 90s was telling you you were seeing a washed up, horrible version of your favorite
Mm.
band. That you had to contend with, like, well, I loved seeing them, but like, was it actually good? And you know, you had this Tony Soprano feeling of like you missed the great period in life. You missed like the good stuff. To Matt's point, and just like get back to it, like by the time they came back in 09, it seemed like the stated goal was tightness, but what was missing was the jams. And around that
Mm.
time, this tour, parts of winter 2003, really became propped up in a segment of the fan base that were like, hey, just 6 years ago, they were jamming really hard and it wasn't as flubby as you thought it was. Yes, there were moments. You're absolutely right, Meg, that You Enjoy Myself from Shoreline, that's all heart. And that's no, like, it's delivered in a really kind of awkward, clunky type of way. As they get through the tour, that gets tighter. And I think the biggest thing I would contend from a flub standpoint is it sounds more prominent here just based on the tone of Trey's guitar, based on the fact that the goal was to kind of get to the jams and see what happens. So, they didn't play songs like Fluffhead. Songs like Divided Sky sounded a little bit like muddier and a little bit looser in a way. But I would also say, like, listen to any 10-show run in any point in Phish history, and you're going to find flubs. Like, that's just it's the way it goes. Like, this is a rock band trying to play classical numbers. This is not a classical, band that is like practicing exactly to hit every single point. Trey talks about this 4 years earlier in Bittersweet Motel. People don't come to see us hit every single mark. They come to see the energy. If 1998 Trey is talking about being sloppy, like,
Yeah.
like it's everywhere. It's everywhere.
Yeah. And in the last 5-6 shows, there aren't, I mean, I don't remember hearing flops. Like, they tighten up so much.
Well, speaking of bringing the energy,
Matt,
Hey,
what a surprise.
I'm awake uncharacteristically early on a Sunday morning, and I saw that you guys were streaming, and I was kind of like talking to my phone, and I just texted RJ. I was like, you just send me the link. I can't do this in comments. So
yeah,
happy Father's Day, guys.
Yeah,
Happy
you,
Father's
man.
Day to you.
Yes. And I'm a 2.0 kid. I saw my first show on the winter tour, even though I've told the story a million times. I'd been listening to the band for a bunch of years, and then really started to dig in on that summer tour. So I've got some passion for this era.
What is there
Oh,
anything
yeah.
that we said so far that you want to jump in on, or any like themes before we talk about specific music that like stick out to you?
Well, just to add on the flubs versus jam thing, like if you weren't active in the community back then, on Fantasy Tour, this was kind of the era before Fantasy Tour was, what it is today. And there was a lot of constructive conversation happening there. And it was really people divided into two camps because they were not nailing the composed sections. Regularly like Reba and stuff like that was just kind of a train wreck, but then they'd get to the jam and it was amazing. Trey was still playing really, really fast back then. All the tempos of everything were really fast. And so you kind of had these people that were like, oh God, like they suck. They don't practice. They can't even play Fluffhead. They don't know how to play it anymore, versus people who were like, yeah, but like skip past the composed part because the jams are so epic and up there with like 97 and 98 and stuff. And really like, I feel, Brian, you probably feel the same way. I feel kind of vindicated now 20 years later, because like at the time it was like, oh, you guys missed it. You missed Phish. Like they're over now. And now to have people, who have been seeing them for 30 years or more be like telling the 3.0 people like, oh, you missed it. 2.0 was the shit is, I feel vindicated.
Yes.
I do think that this is probably the first tour where you did skip composed parts, to get to jams.
Yeah.
Like I don't think that was like a thing in the 90s. It was all part of, it was the first time where like the improv was just a totally separate piece from the songs.
We talked about this in our Fall 96 episode that kicked off this series, that it was kind of the last tour where second sets could be dominated by composed parts being nailed really well. You had like a second set that would be like a Reba, a Bowie, You Enjoy Myself.
Yeah.
And they didn't really stretch beyond the song. Like the appeal was the song. I think something happened when they reinvented themselves in 1997, where suddenly you heard this band realize that the key to longevity was improvisation. And 2.0 kind of meets this, especially 2003, this weird period where they needed a break, but then they needed to reassemble the band for business related reasons. And as you said, RJ, Trey walks backstage after the first show and it's just like, oh my God, it's the exact same party. It's just followed us here 2 years later. But also that sense of, well, the key to longevity is improvisation. So it's this very strange period for them, but I think it has aged extremely well.
So, all right, let's talk about some representative jams. I know we're like, I think everyone's kind of like focused on the second half of the tour appropriately, especially toward the end, like you said earlier, Brian. But just a couple of things that stuck out to me actually going back to these shows for the first time in a really long time. And as I mentioned at the beginning, this did really change my perspective on this tour 21 years later, even though I've listened to it so much. Just listening to it in order and hearing kind of some of the things you guys were pointing out. The 7-7, the first show, I think, you know, you hear them play Waves and, you know, it's like a 10-minute version or something, but I think, and they've been playing it obviously throughout the winter tour, but you just hear this like new sound and like it works so much better than anything that was played up to that point in set one. It's like Stash, Sample, Billy Breeze, like it's fine, but then they like it really captures the era so well. Like they were playing, I don't know if they were, if the material influenced the improv or if that was how Trey was writing to the stuff that Tom, you know, gave him at that point. But I just feel like the Waves there and then in the Shoreline sense is great. Like there's just early versions of these that are just great. I think Spices is you know, it's probably appropriately only played twice. But some of these early shows, I think you hear that new material kind of like starting to develop. And the Sense has like the debut, right? And then 2 nights later, an even better version. So that just sets the tone for like the rest of the tour, you know, hearing those new songs kind of start to carry them.
I wanted to say something about that because I think the new material is really interesting in this tour because it's a very earnest. It's when they sound like the most earnest when they're playing. I think Trey's tone sounds the clearest when they're playing the new material. And then you hear them play like a Wilson that sounds like super metal and fuzzy and gritty. And it's so interesting that they were getting more earnest when they're playing the new material. And it just shows that that's always where they want to be, kind of where their heart wants to be in a way.
Yeah, I mean, what did you guys think about that? Like seeing shows for the first time around this time and seeing like Secret Smile and Discern and neither of you guys probably saw Spices because like nobody did because it was 2 shows. But like, you know, those kind of songs thrown in there that are, like you said, very earnest, but also like kind of don't really fit. Like the singing doesn't really work. Like they're just like, to me, a lot of those, like this, especially the slower songs, they just don't really work. But I don't know what Matt or Brian, what did you guys think about the new material, either that stuff or like the improv driven stuff?
It seemed different for sure. Yeah. Even like when Walls of the Cave came out, remember they released it like at midnight on AOL or something like that the fall before, and I remember hearing like the piano intro and it was like not at all what anybody expected, and it was definitely a new era of Phish. And some of those ballads, Discern, Thunderhead, Anything But Me, were, I think, immediate bathroom break songs for a lot of people, but like looking back, so much of that material is so cherished now. It's aged really, really well. Maybe because it was less dad rocky than some of the current stuff. And so by comparison, it was a little bit easier to ballot. But I mean, like I've said this before, like Anything But Me is one of my all-time favorite Tom lyrics. They haven't played that song in like over 12 years or something like that. And it's so beautiful. And as they've kind of gotten older, those types of songs, I think, fit a lot more. Like, Pebbles and Marbles, I feel like a lot of people didn't dig that back then. And now if they play it, it's like a huge bust out and everybody's super stoked on it because it just kind of like matches like the maturity of the band at this point.
And Brian, sorry to interrupt. I just want to throw this out there. Like I mentioned earlier, this was really the first like batch of new material since '98. So you have like most of '99. I mean, I guess they were introducing some of those Tab songs in '99, but it's really the first time you get like real new songs in a really long time. And like '99, 2000 was just kind of a dearth of in terms of new material. And so they come back and it's like a totally different direction, like Matt was saying.
Yeah, and I mean the sound of it, it almost reminds me the way that these songs are written, the way that there's like space within them. It almost reminds me of Wilco's A Ghost Is Born, in the sense that you hear kind of the pain of what these guys are going through personally. You hear the pain in Tom's lyrics, and musically, like they're kind of intended to almost like stop you in your tracks and make you really contemplate, which in a lot of cases wasn't the goal of earlier Fish material. Like if you think about that 98 material, so much of that is influenced by the Remain in Light Halloween tour or Halloween show, the kind of minimalistic funk that they had discovered in 1997, and they were trying to write songs off of those jams. These are more like pure, four chords, verse, bridge, chorus type of like traditional songwriting approaches, aside from, Waves, which is kind of just like a reason to jam, and Pebbles and Walls of the Cave. But I think also the one thing that really informs this tour that I did not hear until probably 6 years later was the Victor sessions, the Victor disc sessions, where they go into, I think it's when they played Saturday Night Live or when they played Letterman.
It's Letterman.
Letterman, maybe. It was around that same time. They booked a studio session in Midtown Manhattan and went in and just kind of jammed, and they wrote kind of freeform songs. And if you listen to those, it's only available on YouTube, which is really annoying. I would spend a lot of money on a vinyl reissue of that on Record Store Day 2025. I know I asked you a lot, Kevin Shapiro. There's still $725.99 on the docket, but like, can we get the Victor disc out there just so that everybody can hear it? Because it sets the foundation for how they're going to approach jamming, and they sound like 2.0 Fish in that it's not as bright, it's not as it doesn't have that kind of, it's arena rock, but it almost like, I think the closest comparison I can make is it sounds like Fish almost as Crazy Horse, in the sense that it's very sludgy. It's very much, this is music that should be made at 3 a.m., 4 a.m., in a bit of a haze, and it works really well in that manner. And so if we were to have heard that in December 2002 or January 2003, I think a lot of people would have had different expectations going into these tours. But to get back to your question, like when they would play songs like Wilson or Divided Sky, like at the time, I remember having issues with it because I wanted to hear Wilson. I wanted to hear classic Fish. And
Yeah.
It's very much like Matt said, there's a vindication of like, we were there at the start of this. We like, this is the era I belong to from a Fish standpoint, and it has aged really well in that standpoint. One just quick, to your point, RJ, about the new songs informing them, two early highlights for me were the Round Room and Seven Below from The Gorge, that night 2 show.
Seven Below.
The Seven Below is just wild. It's like goes completely off
Amazing.
the tracks. And it's just Fishman and Trey locked in and like, can I play faster than you type of competition. Whereas the Round Room is like late set one, sunset at the Gorge, just really beautiful, blissful type of stuff. I wish that they would do that more with Round Room. I wish they would play Round Room more, but like, I wish that we could hear that expansiveness out of it, because it's just such an interesting song to jam off of.
I love that Seven Below so much. Trey has that super muddy tone, and the beginning of the jam reminds me of like late Dead jamming, when they're so in the weeds and you don't know if they're going to make it out. It's just, and everyone's like pounding away. Yeah, it's an awesome jam. That was one of my top jams of this tour.
Yeah, really fun. And I think they start to pick up and kind of lock in. The Ghost from the night before, the 712, it's really fun. Like it's more, you don't get a lot of like upbeat major key jamming in this tour, but that Ghost is like, it feels very fun. There's not a lot of, I don't think that a lot of this tour sounds fun. I mean, it's like fun to listen to, but it's not like now when like Trey is building to a peak and then everyone like goes nuts. It's like a lot of it is like, what the fuck is going on? Which is fun in a different way.
There's no like say it to me Santos moments.
No. Even like the hoods are like weird and long, and they don't really like, it's a lot of craziness. I'm just gonna throw out one of my favorite jams of all time is the 715 Mr. Completely. Fish debut, open set 2. I mean, this is like to me, this kind of encompasses this tour. There's like, it's kind of like now when, you know, when Fishman, when they play this song and then Fishman will keep playing the drum beat into like the next song, like
Mhm.
throughout the set, he'll just, because it's like a, I mean, it seems super complicated, but you'll like hear him like going back to the theme, but he keeps it steady and driving it, like never slows down. And Trey and Fishman at the beginning are just so on top of it. And it's just crazy. There's like 15 minutes where it's like, you know, kind of this O3 sound, and then they get into this like bluesy space for like 7 minutes, and it's just like you guys were saying earlier, they're just totally connected. And then it like gets slower and like a little more dark, like 20 minutes in, but it never slows down, and then like ends at 25, 26 minutes. Fishman still somehow never slowing down, and it like comes to this peak. It just is like, man, it's so great. And I'm not big on like, I'm not like a big cover person, as you guys know, but the segue into Lowrider is pretty sweet.
It's
Like,
so
it's a
good.
pretty amazing way to end a huge jam. I mean, it's just, I feel like that's, to me, that's one of the peaks of the tour.
Yeah, that's an amazing jam.
Yeah, absolutely. That Mr. Completely was one of my workout jams for a really, really long time. So it just keeps going and going.
Yeah.
And it's funny because that show actually, I feel like it has a link to a modern 3.0 trope, which is that, like, as with, you know, a Tweezer Fest that you get, you know, occasionally, where it just kind of keeps popping up in the course of a long flowing set. Fishman still will do that thing where they play Mr. Completely, and then like in the middle of jams later in the set, he just drops the Mr. Completely intro
Yeah,
beat.
yeah,
And it's like, oh, we're back in Mr. Completely again.
It's a pretty, I mean, it's a really fun set, but that first 30 whatever minutes is just, it's wild.
And then we got the debut of Spread It Round, which is, you know, I mean, geez, you know, start off the Greatest Hits album with that one.
That one, it's strange because it feels so connected to modern Trey songwriting. Like, I'm honestly surprised they don't play Spread It Round today. And very strange, like, dichotomy of an extremely upbeat, a little bit too earnest song about communal integration and spreading love everywhere, with like pretty wild noise jams that come out of it. Like the It jam off of Spread It Round is really good, even though I kind of want to just fast forward through the song.
What, Megan, what do you got in terms of a jam highlight?
Well, it's really funny listening to all of these tours in such a short amount of time, listening to all these shows, and you really want something that's going to kind of stop you from what you're doing. You know, you're like doing dishes
Yeah,
or something, and you want
that's
something
true.
that's going to be like, whoa. And the gumbo from Deer Creek 722 completely stopped me in my tracks. It's in the first set, it's 18 minutes. The way it goes between darkness and light is so incredible. It's truly majestic. Fishman, again, is so incredible. He's got big rolling drums, and the end, they land in that reverby space, which they do so well on this tour. It's a breathtaking jam. It's the third song in the show. I love that on this tour. They're not afraid to like open a show with like a 28-minute Sense and Subtle Sounds. You know, they're just like, they just will go at any point in this tour. It's so exciting. And I love this gumbo. And I can't remember the last time I heard it. It was exciting to listen to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really great. To me, like, listening to that gumbo, we talked about this before, but like, sign of a good tour is like the songs that take on a bigger role that haven't been jammed previously. You know, it's like any song can be jammed.
Totally.
And I feel like this gumbo is a good that's a good representation. I also just from that show, the melt is pretty crazy. And I hadn't gone back to the show in a long time, but it's like, I don't know, 12, like there's, 12 or 15 minutes or something, and then it like turns into like a On the Corner era Miles Davis jam session for like 10 minutes, and you're like, what the fuck is going on? Like, it's second set opener, and it feels like by this point in the tour it's all like really working pretty well.
Yeah, you talk about like pretty music from this tour that is a little bit fleeting. That concept, that gumbo is it.
Yeah.
I would put that gumbo, the twist from Camden, at least the back end when it moves into this very pretty space. Parts of the waves from it. Yeah, there are moments where they find beauty, but it all is kind of through this filter of, I don't know if it's sadness at this point in their lives, or if it's anger, or if it's frustration, or like if it's a combination of all those things. But there's a lot of heavy emotions through these jams, and you have these just slight moments where they find just some period of bliss and peace, and you hear it come out. And this gumbo is kind of perfect for that.
Mm-hmm.
Brian, what do you got?
I mean, I got a lot. So like, do you just want me to list jams and like you guys can like be like, okay, let's talk about that one, or like, I mean,
yeah,
there's a lot.
Brian, what's your favorite? What's your favorite jam on this tour?
My favorite jam is my favorite jam of the era and a top 2 or 3 Phish jam of all time, which is the Cross-Eyed and Painless from Burgettstown.
Yeah, that was my second from this tour.
I have listened so many times, and I've yet to kind of figure out like the pattern of how this jam goes. It surprises me every time I hear it. It's so fast, it's so melodic, but then it's dark and hazy, and then it comes back, and it has like multiple peaks throughout it. And I have yet to hear a wrong note played throughout the entire jam. I think it's just literally just like they're shot out of a cannon. They've played these rarities in set one. They opened with one of the biggest rarities. This is the first performance since Big Cypress, I believe, of Cross-Eyed and Painless. They'll play it one more time in 2.0 at Deer Creek in 2004, and then not again until summer 2009. And throughout 2009 and 2010, it was kind of still reserved as like a special set 2 opener. But this version, man, it's everything I love about the era. It's that willingness to dive completely off the deep end and just see what's on the other side. And yeah, I honestly don't have a lot to say about it because I'm just amazed by it. So I'll let you guys speak about it.
It's effortless, like you were saying. And I feel like Fishman is really driving this jam. It's so percussive and so driving. I thought I actually was a little bit surprised. I think that people always talk about the darkness of this tour, but there's a lot of like an underneath feeling of drivenness. Like there's a drive to a lot of these jams that I didn't expect to hear as like a through line. And this one is a perfect example of that. And yeah, it's beautiful. And the way it lands in Thunderhead is just like perfect.
Matt, do you have jams from the tour that I know you weren't scheduled to be part of this, but I'm sure that you have a couple that you want to point out.
Oh, of course. Well, I always come back to the 2 Camden shows, which were the only 2 that I actually saw on this tour. Strangely enough, the girl I was dating at the time, who was from Pittsburgh, I was like, let's go to Star Lake. And we were both living in Philly for the summer, and she was like, no, like Star Lake kind of sucks as a venue, and like, it's not worth the 5-hour drive, and because we'd have to turn around and come right back. And then I was like, all right, if you really think so. And then I was watching the set list roll in. Oh man, like that was the show that kind of broke. There's usually that one show on the tour where it's like, oh, okay, now we're doing like real Phish stuff. Which is great, and all the bust outs and everything like that. But I actually do think that the 2 Camden shows are better shows all around in terms of the playing. And they were definitely like super, super pumped to be heading up to it.
Yeah.
The Sense and Subtle Sounds is easy to name, and it's probably the best jam of the tour. But the entire second set of that first night, it's a 4-song second set, and one of the songs is Taste. So that should tell you like how much they were stretching out. That Yem is probably the best Yem of 2.0. Goes hard, Trey, and it's not. There's nothing weird about it. It's just they do Yem like they would back in like 94, 95, which is like a ripping guitar solo. And then there's the twist that starts that set out. That's just like preview of what's to come later with Twist, really. I mean, and how far out they can take it. And then Don't Sleep, because 7:30 gets all the attention, rightly so. Because I mean, the first set was all, I think every single song except for one was a bust out, and then second set was crazy jams. Oh yeah, the one song in set one that wasn't a bust out was the Sense and Subtle Sounds, which went for 35 minutes.
Yeah.
But then the Mike's Groove and the Hood from the next night, the Mike's Groove, I mean, you get into Weekapog and they jam on Inagata Davida. Somebody from Iron Butterfly had died that day, and so they get into this Inagata Davida jam. And the Hood is like a 3.0 Hood. It changes key, it goes far out. I think it's 18 or 19 minutes long. It's really, really crazy. It doesn't have the big Hood peak, but it goes really, really far. Just one of those nights or kind of 2-night runs where like you could tell they were just able to and wanting to do whatever at any moment. There was no plan, there was no sticking to the script. It was just like it was all happening.
I would argue that Hood, the one that gets all the attention is the Charlotte one, which is almost 30 minutes. This Hood is a little bit shorter. I think it's just around like 22. It's a hair over 20, but it gets to this like 5 or 6 minute connective period between all 4 members that is somewhat bright, but still that locked in 2.0. Let's like hone in on a theme and just see where this takes us. And you're absolutely right, Matt. It feels more in the vein of the kind of exploratory Hoods of 3.0, where just a lot can happen. A lot of keys can be changed, and a lot of different territory is like, discovered and played within from a musical standpoint. Again, Charlotte gets all the attention, rightly so. It's a great one. It's a 30-minute version of Harry Hood. Come on. But if you haven't heard Camden, oh my God, please go and listen to that. You will be absolutely floored.
Yeah. Okay. We're extremely late for taking a break, but we do have to do it for our obligation so that we can get Brian an Xfinity upgrade. So just stand by for a second. All right, guys. What we've been doing is 2 representative or don't miss shows of the tour. I know that will be hard, but let's run through those. Actually, that seems like a good place to go next. Megan, what do you have one?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to go with 725 Charlotte. I love this show. I think the flow, especially in the first set, is amazing. You've got an 18-minute gin in the first set. It's so locked in, really melodic groove. And set 2 is just opens with Drown and just an awesome, unhurried, really mellow jam into Kung. More groove underneath Kung than usual. Just that groove that they're playing underneath Kung, like inject that into my veins. That is like my favorite shit. It is so sick. It's such like a monster groove. I fucking love it. It goes into twist, incredible flow, and it just continues with that flow into heavy things. They drop in so sweetly and effortlessly into that. And it's again a lot of like clarity and earnestness in that heavy things. And this is a cool set because I love when there's a set that doesn't have like a lot of my favorite songs, but I still love it. That's when I know like the playing is just where I want it to be. And this Hood, again, you talked about that, but it has a vulnerability that Trey didn't really have at the beginning of the tour. And I really hear that here. And it's beautiful to see that kind of develop through the tour. And then you've got a jammed out 16-minute Bowie. So, just fucking great show. Love this show.
It's a good one. It's really good. I just want to go back to 7-9 quickly. I talked a little bit about that, but I think it's a really, really good show.
I love that show.
There's the gin that ends the first set it just has that classic sound. Mike is really, I feel like Mike is just so prominent in this tour. And there's a Piper in the second set that's just kind of just like all of the ones of the era, but there's a lot of like shifting in that one, but into twist, into that Sense and Subtle Sounds, and then into a Mike's Groove. I mean, it's a really strong show that I probably haven't listened to in 20 years. It's a really good one. Brian, what do you got?
Well, great call on that 7-9. That gin is just, they end the set with a 26-minute dust of gin that like gets way, way, way out there. Just such a cool moment. We talked 7:30. We talked 7:29. I'm going to talk 8-2. The first day of It. I think this is one of the best shows the band has ever played. They are so stoked to be there. This is their first time at Limestone in 5 years. They've played a really strong tour. They're on a high as the tour is ending. They come out, every song, even if it's not a proper jam, gets stretched out a little bit. The AC/DC bag has kind of moments of playfulness. The Yamar it's a 17-minute dark, dismal version of Yamar, which goes into Runaway Jim, which has moments of kind of elasticity. The Reba, you can almost hear the band like come to silence and just realize like we've got 2 days to do whatever we want. And they even say it after that. They take a few minutes between that and Birds, and they're like, we're just trying to figure out what to play because we don't have to be anywhere for 48 hours. The Meat Stick, one of my least favorite Phish songs ever. Unbelievable version, like crazy jams. Two Versions of Me is probably my favorite ballad of the era, and it's really nicely played here. Limb by Limb, one of my rules for this summer tour is listen to every version of Limb by Limb because there's so much that is like so much interplay within every single jam. The second set, Z's and I See You Brother, Lawn Boy, Discern, another new song I wish would stay. The middle section has just so much space and angst, and it's just wild experimentation. The Waves, the Bowie, and then the third set you get this perfect segue. Rock and Roll, Seven Below, Senses All Sounds, back into Seven Below, Spread It Round, Bug. Bug was killing it through this era. Another point for Matt talking 7:30. If you listen very closely on the soundboard after Bug, Fishman says to Trey, like, did you hear how fucking great that was? I kept going back for every peak. And like you can hear them like just like going crazy over the version of Bug. Every Bug from this tour is amazing. A rarity encore of Doglog and Mango Song, and then the middle of the night in front of, I don't know, I've heard as few as 400 and as many as 10,000 fans. Like, it was a small.
Brian, we lost your audio again. I think.
He's saying it was so great. I'm getting an echo now too.
Yeah, me too. That's weird.
All right, I muted Brian. I think it went away.
It was so
Matt,
good he can't talk anymore.
Matt, I did want to just comment on the Waves because this is my favorite jam from it, and it is unbelievable. It's just that horror space movie soundtrack vibe. It's so eerie in the soundscapes, and I love how Bowie emerges from it. This Waves is definitely one of my favorite things that they did this whole tour.
I think I'm back, so I will just say quickly, like the Tower Jam is just 60 minutes of everything you want to hear from 2.0 Phish. All like, my God. No, I have nothing else to say. 8/2/2003. Put it in my veins.
Matt, do you got a show you want to throw out there?
If we're talking about the two representative shows of the tour, I think it's 7:30 and 8/2. I agree with Brian on 8/2. I mean, that's really, as festivals, the best festival days have done. It's an amazing summary of everything they had done on the tour up to that point, plus kind of what was possible next with the Tower Jam and the deep Waves Jam, which is just absolutely incredible. I guess like I don't want to bring the conversation down, but the sad thing to me about it was that like there was so much promise then, and there was so much excitement after the first 8 months of the band being back. Like even naysayers, I think at that point were like, oh, okay, like Phish is really they're back. This is it.
Yeah.
And then, but that was kind of the end of 2.0. Yeah. Like after that, things went downhill really fast.
Yeah. I think the sober coach retired.
Well, it's like when your parents are visiting and everything's going okay in college, and then they leave and you open the closet and like the bongs fall out and you're just going to get fucked up. It's just like it's the party is waiting for them to walk out the door. You just know it's going to get bad.
Well, and to that point, like Trey, I think gave an interview with Relics after this tour, and that was where he first talked about the sobriety aspect of it. And he talked about how the band was considering playing the Basement Tapes for Halloween that year, which is one of the great unknowns, like if that had ever happened. But they didn't play again until the 20th anniversary run. And you got the 2x4, 20th anniversary Miami. 20th anniversary is not on our list for reasons. It also doesn't qualify because there's only 4 shows. But the Miami run is a really wild, fun party that was, as you listen to them 6 or 4 months later in Vegas, totally unsustainable. Like the highs
Yeah.
of Miami could not be sustained in any way. And then we hear what happens throughout 2004. I think to Matt's point, you leave it just, you know, wondering where this band can go. And like that was one of my big takeaways, not to jump ahead to a section, but like that was one of my big takeaways from this tour, was the fact that like there is this great what if. Like if they could have maintained what made this tour work, who knows where this era goes, who knows how it evolves. I think we all know long term there were a lot of bigger problems there that were not going to be solved on the road, that had to,
Yeah.
you know, they needed time, they needed, you know, huge challenges and huge problems that the band was going to deal with personally for the 3.0 era to come back as it is, and the joy to return to Phish. But there was a sense of they were playing at such a level that if they could have figured out a way to maintain it, man, I would have loved to have heard what this band sounded like in 2006. Like the summer 2003 version is what I mean.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I saw Greensboro in March 1st of 03. I think I saw the Philly 225, then Greensboro, and then didn't see another show until the 11/28 Nassau show, and it was very different. It was like
Yeah.
very different 6 months, you know, or 9 months, whatever it was. Can I just say something, guys, that you're going to disagree with, probably all of you, but I need to say it. The last night of it, the Ghost is just amazing. Like all-time version, Into Mountains in the Mist. That the whole set is really, really good. The Mellow Mood, Into Ghost. The 46 Days, I know people love it. It's 26 minutes of noise jam, which is fine. Like noise jamming, great. And then 7 minutes of actual music. And I think like maybe because I was like just burnt out after listening to, I don't know, 9 days straight of 03 summer, but like I just don't think it's that interesting. I mean, it's kind of like the Tower Jam repeated a little bit. Like it's basically just it's them like fucking around with effects for, you know, 25 minutes, and then they kind of jam toward the end. I don't think it's like that notable. I think the other jams you guys pointed out from the day before and the Ghost from this show are incredible, and the Chalk Dust also from the first set. But I don't know.
So at a base level, I disagree entirely. But I will just say it kind of goes back to like what we talked about at the start of this. Like I think that one of the things that will endlessly fascinate me about Phish is that they're willing to take risks, regardless if it appeals to the entire fan base. And I think you're absolutely spot on that it is the Tower Jam in front of an audience. And Page talks about this during the It documentary, which was filmed right after Vegas 04. So there's a lot of issues with the documentary at whole. But I think the best point he makes is I think the best point any member of Phish has ever made about their music, that part of the goal of these long jams is to get to a place musically that you would never get to unless you played all of that music beforehand.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. It feels like industrial age Britain in like the 1870s, where like animals are being slaughtered and like children are working like 80 hours a week and losing limbs. But like there's a larger fucking goal, and we all benefited from that goal. And thank God, like we have weekends and child labor doesn't exist anymore. But like, man, it is a churn. It is an industrial churn. It's like fucking steel being made.
Yeah.
And then they get to a point around like 18, 19, 20 minutes that is unlike any music I've ever heard this band play. And they literally wouldn't have gotten to that without that first part. So I think you're both right. And also there's like another side to it. That experimentation was necessary.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think 40-minute jams are bound to have some parts that maybe could be cut out, right? Like you're saying, Brian, like you have to get through that to get to that. But I think the willingness in that jam to sit in a dark space and explore like meditative soundscapes, and I think that is something I want to applaud when any band does it. I think, you know, I saw Goose a few nights ago, and one of the reasons I'm really compelled to keep seeing them right now is because they're more willing to sit in those spaces than I've heard in the past. And that is because Phish did this too. I think this jam is like a masterclass of being in the moment in a jam. And I am relieved at the end of the jam when they find melody again. I'm like, okay, great. We're back. But it's full of weird shit for weird shit Brinkman, it's perfect.
It reminds me of we talked about in the last episode, the Halloween '98 Wolfmans, where it is just
Yeah.
unleashed. And to your point, Meg, like there's a near Soul Planet cheese in the 35-minute Wave of Hope from Mexico. We don't fault it, like they almost go into it and we don't fault it. We're cool with it. We let it happen. They're just working some shit out.
Exactly. You got to do that or you're never going to get, the 40-minute chalk dust like we got in Mexico this year. So I'm here for it.
Yeah. I think that's all fair and great, like rationalization, but at the end of this, but the next show after this is basically the beginning of the end. So I don't know where we're going with this 46 days. Like I don't know where the 5-day work week comes in, but I understand the point. And I love,
it's a long game. It's a long game. Okay.
We don't get the Tahoe tweezer without this. I mean, I like dark and evil Fish. Like I think it's fun to listen to. I guess my only point, I think it's slightly overrated in like looking at social media comments over the past week about this tour. There were several people who were like, 46 days is like the tour, and I'm like, I just don't see it. I think there's so much else to this tour that has like more substance and I don't know, like more substance, I guess. Matt, what do you got on that or anything else?
No, I agree. I mean, it's amazing. I don't know that it's an encapsulation of the tour. I think it's better looked at as like a potential path forward. I guess in the revisionist history, like we somehow missed out on Fish's Metal Machine music phase, which could have been interesting. But I mean, that's, just to kind of add to what I was saying before, it was like, felt like there was these opportunities that were in front of us and like the next Fish show or whatever was going to be, or the next era was going to be amazing. Strangely enough, I remember the following summer, I had stayed at school to do some summer sessions, catch up on some courses. And I was walking from my friend's apartment across town back to my apartment. And I listened to The Ghost from it. And I remember literally thinking like, God, this is so good. And like, they're so hot right now. And I cannot wait. Like I've hit my point where I get to like, I'm going to be going on Fish tour and I'm going to be seeing all these shows and it's going to be amazing. And I got back to my apartment and I looked at my computer and Trey had released the statement that they were breaking up. And I was like, what? How is that possible? How is the universe working against me? But, and there was good stuff after that, but you have to like view it through a certain lens. There's good jams, but they're not healthy jams, I would say.
I just want to go back to 46 days quickly, but I just want to say in my defense that if you run your stats through like, the Zizix thing, it's my third most overplayed song in terms of like the number of shows I've seen. The one good version I ever saw was that Merriweather version in 2015 that goes into Bug. That's like one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. But other than that, it's like, come on, guys. God.
I would argue you saw a really good one at Magna Ball a week later.
Magna Ball is good too.
Full 2 versions of Me Jam that is just beautiful, and
it's a pretty good. Okay, guys, what are your?
There soon, though. Both of them.
I'm sure we will.
Very soon to talk about this. Hint.
Hint, hint. Okay, what's the one takeaway? Because we got to wrap this up so that everyone can go be celebrated as fathers or something.
My big takeaway is that 2.0 Fish, specifically 2003, is like sour beer. So like the first time you have it, you might be like, why would I want a beer like this when regular beer is already so good? It tastes like something might be off. But then you try a really good sour beer, you have like the 7 Below from the Gorge, and you start to develop like a taste for it. And the next thing you know, you're at a brewery and you're ordering a sour beer, and then you have one regularly and you learn to love it. And then that's what you want when you're on Fish Lot is sour beer. So that was my journey with this tour. It's an acquired taste, and I think crucially important to the evolution of Fish. And I do think that it is curious to think about if they hadn't had this tour, how it would have affected their thoughts about coming back. But I have loved getting to
Wow.
spend this time in 2003.
Awesome.
That's a fantastic
great.
comparison. I can't.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
Yeah.
right there.
Thanks.
It's great. Matt, what's your takeaway from this tour?
Yeah, I agree. Once again, I'm glad to see it, evaluated later on in such a positive light. But I do see how, especially for longtime fans, really like longtime fans and then newer fans, like it's probably difficult to get into. I like your metaphor, Meg, and I would say, just to keep with the current news, it's almost like the 2.0 era is like their gaucho, like it's like graduate level Phish. You played it if you played it for anybody, they'd probably be a little confused, but if you've listened to so much Phish and kind of broken through the barriers of being open to whatever they do, you will find that it's actually like pretty brilliant at times.
Nice.
Yeah, I'll just piggyback on both of those because I think time sometimes is the biggest benefactor, is what aids music. I think we're going through it. We've been going through it for the last kind of 10 years culturally, music from the 80s at large, that immediately after Smells Like Teen Spirit hit the radio waves, everything that had synthesizers and gated drums sounded dated in the worst way possible. And there was a big, kind of backlash against the music that was popular in the 1980s. And I think to Matt's point about Gaucho, and I think from a personal standpoint, like two of my, I listened to Neil Young's Living with War. No, not that one. Whatever his 1986 album was with Crazy Horse. I can't think of the album title right now. But also Dylan's Infidels. Like, these are albums that sounded really dated immediately afterwards, and now there's a ton of brilliance and there's a ton that has sort of bled into modern music and great, thinking of just like the war on drugs. And I think Phish 2.0 is the same sort of way. It was an acquired taste in the moment, but over time the brilliance has seeped out, and sometimes you just need that with anything to, it doesn't maybe hit the way you want it to in the moment, but 15, 20 years later, it suddenly, the beauty kind of permeates.
I think we've like sort of gotten, as I said at the beginning, I think this is like not that different from stuff that they're doing now. And so like, I think the more they move into the direction of like being willing and able to take risks and push the sound beyond just like a very, predictable pattern, like I think it gets more validation, because it's like, actually this kind of, I don't think like 10 years ago we would have been talking about this tour as like a setting the stage for what's to come. Like I think that's like, now that we're in this era where Phish is, I think, playing not that differently from some of these shows, that we can kind of like see that evolution. But definitely changed my take going through all these. So it was fun. So all right, next week we're doing another episode next week. You guys know this, right?
I'm exhausted already.
Consistent
are-
HF pod. This is crazy.
Yeah, don't worry, we're not going anywhere. We have next week, we have the number 13 tour of all time, and we are going to summer 2015, which man, we got a lot of prep to do, and I guess that does technically includes Dick's also. So we got a lot of work to do.
Basketball and Dick's. Oh my god,
Yeah,
I'm not gonna sleep this week.
We're going to be talking about, there's going to be some Blaze On and some No Men and some, some
So
shade
much.
talk. There's going to be a lot. Also, I just want to tell, I was, when I was looking at the overplayed, underplayed songs, anyone who's listening, if you can guess what first set opener I've seen more than any other first set opener, I will send you some HF Pod merch. I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
Shit,
And
I want to get this now because I want HF
it's-
Pod merch.
It's so surprising and weird. Okay, Matt, Are you going to come back at some point soon?
I'm always here. I told you, as
That was
evidenced
awesome.
as evidenced by this morning.
Yeah.
I can jump in. No, it's always good to be around. Let me know anytime you want me to join in. Always happy to talk about the fish.
It was awesome. It's awesome to hear your perspective on this tour.
Can I say one thing? And I shared this on a corner of social media that I still operate in. I'm away from most of the big ones, but in the past week, Trey sat in with Billy Joel, and then he inducted Steely Dan into the Songwriters Hall of Fame and played 2 Steely Dan songs. Side note, the original REM lineup also reunited and played a song. And then we found out last night that Trey did an interview with Mark Maron, and it's going to air soon. And
Insane.
so I'm only saying that because like I'm pretty sure I died like a week or 2 ago, and this is all some sort of like afterlife simulation. So I just wanted to say thank you all for being here in my afterlife simulation. It's great to have you.
I mean, I gotta say, Matt, I'm a little nervous because you and I have spent both like a lot of time, curating questions for Trey, interviewing Trey, editing Trey, and like I know that Maron is gonna get some shit out of Trey that like he's never said before, and I'm already like kind of jealous.
Yeah, totally.
but it's gonna be amazing.
That's how he does it. That's how he does it. Why he's the best.
You'd be like, so your childhood pretty fucked up, Trey? Is that what happened? That's the way it's gonna start. All right. Well, I will be back next week with summer 2015. And Matt, thanks for joining. Thanks, Brian. Brian, did we do it justice?
Yeah.
And I just want to say, like, the surprise Matt entrance was amazing, and also for the first time in the history of this podcast, I feel like I was on even footing with another 2.0 fan, and somebody
Yay.
understands 2.0. So I didn't have to like battle this encroaching army that was coming from all sides. I was able to just make my points and know that they were going to be backed up and maybe a bit opposed to, but Matt. Every time we do 2.0, like you have to be here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're launching a new series. Fish
man.
2.0 HF Pod covers it all. Every show, start to finish, and Matt and I will lead it.
Perfect. Let's do
Looking
it.
forward to hearing about it. All right, guys. Take it easy. We'll see y'all next week.
Bye, everyone.